Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where each week we give you another episode of what's happening here on our Northeast Iowa 21-acre homestead. My husband Alvin and I have been married for 25 years and we have 7 children. 5 of those children still live at home. Our oldest 2 are married and no longer live at home, so this means we also have 2 son-in-laws and 1 grandson so far. So on our 21-acre homestead, we seek to preserve the self-sufficient lifestyle of our old order Mennonite heritage for the next generation. We involve the children in every aspect of the homestead, from raising and harvesting our own meat, gardening and preserving to fill the family's larder, or preserving the dairy from the family milk cows, plus all the many other skills that develop the character and integrity and relationships of a family that seeks to bring glory and honor to their Heavenly Father. Hello, YouTube family. I am so happy to have you back here again for another episode of Homesteading with the Zimmermans. As you can tell, we are in the process of refinishing our patio. So my nephew's going to come today and reseal the concrete, and that is why everything is cleaned off. But today I'm going to show you how we can diced tomatoes with green chilies. So at the grocery store, this is often sold under the brand Rotel, and it's just diced tomatoes and green chilies. We use jalapenos in this, and this is a staple in our pantry, and I've not shown us making this before because here's the thing. I don't can everything every year. I might do, 25 quarts of these, and then I might not need it for the next year. But it is, and on the years that I do 100 quarts of pasta sauce, that gives me a little room to then the next year focus more on salsa or something like that. So for our canned goods, our home canned goods, my goal is always for 18 months to 2 years worth on our shelf at a time. That just gives me room for crop failures or gives me room to experiment with new canning recipes, and I don't always have to put all my focus onto the staples. So I've had somebody comment and say, you don't seem to be canning as much this year. And to that, my reply is, I am canning. I'm just not filming everything I'm canning for a couple reasons. One reason might be that I just filmed it last year and there's no reason for me to repeat a video that's only a year old. And number 2 is it wasn't a great garden year, so there's not a lot of pressure. I did a green bean video last year. We canned some green beans this year. I just didn't put it on video. And sweet corn we did last year, and we didn't need sweet corn this year, so I didn't plant sweet corn for the freezer. So although it may seem like I'm not putting away as much food as I did last year, for me it's more of a 4-year span. How much food did I put away in the last 3 or 4 years? Because we don't depend on simply what we canned this year. I just take stock of what we're low in, and then that's what I focus on. And anyway, let's get to canning this diced tomatoes with green chilies. So next I'm gonna see if I can find a bunch of green jalapenos. The red ones will work too, it's just that the green ones will make more of a contrasting color, which is what I want. Okay, first thing we're going to do is wash all our tomatoes. So first we are simply going to clean the tomatoes and take off any blemishes or bad spots. And I'm also sorting them because I think I'm going to have more tomatoes than what I need for making Rotel. So I'm going to, some of the bigger ones I might put in the freezer for making barbecue sauce. Because when I make barbecue sauce, it's the same as when I make to make ketchup. I like to freeze them first. So, because that makes a bigger, when you freeze them, you get a thicker sauce. So I'm sorting them. I also may make pasta sauce with those. I'd like to try so that I don't have to buy tomato paste. All right, we are ready to, and I'm going to chop them fine. And I'm going to drain them after I chop them. So I'm going to use mostly these little Roma tomatoes. And then I'm going to put them in a strainer and strain them very well. So next I'm going to get the jalapenos ready, and technically I really do need to be wearing gloves to do this, but I didn't have any gloves and my daughter didn't have any gloves, so I decided I'm just going to do the best I can, and I just use a spoon and scoop the seeds out. If you want a much spicier Rotel, you just leave all of the jalapeno seeds or some of the seeds in, but I'm removing almost all the seeds, and I just take a teaspoon and scoop them out. So then I am going to chop the jalapenos the same size that I did the tomatoes, and I will link this little chopper in the description for you. It makes chopping vegetables so easy, and there's a couple different size blades that you can use. I'm using the fine diced one for this recipe, but especially when it comes to salsa, this chopper makes everything go so much faster. So then for about every 12 cups of diced tomatoes, I'm going to add 2 to 4 cups of diced jalapenos. And that all just, it's completely up to you. Depends on how spicy you want your diced tomatoes with green chilies or your Rotel. So then we're going to start filling our jars. I am using half-pint jars, and make sure you're not using a slotted spoon because you want to have a little bit of juice with every spoonful of tomatoes and diced jalapenos that you put into your jar, because we're not going to add any water to this. We're just going to let the tomatoes make their own juice. So into each 1/2 pint jar, we're using 1/4 teaspoon of salt. If you're using pint jars, you would use half a teaspoon of salt. You can see we are filling these jars almost all the way to the top, because what will happen, because the tomatoes and jalapenos are raw, they will shrink together quite a bit when we water bath can them. And so we're filling them almost to the very top of the jar because we expect them to shrink. So then, because tomatoes are borderline low acid already, and then when I add the jalapenos, I know that I'm bringing the pH down even more. I am adding 1/8 a teaspoon of citric acid to each half-pint jar, and then as you can see, we also did some tiny 1/4 pint jars for our daughter and son-in-law, and we're adding just a pinch of citric acid to those. So I am using 4Jars brand jars and lids and rings. They have just come out with their own brand of jars, and they are very nice and sturdy. You can tell when you pick them up that there's more glass and they're thicker, they have thicker walls. They're just heavier altogether. So we're of course going to wipe the rims and put on the clean lids and turn them just finger tight. You don't want to turn them too tight because some oxygen is going to need to escape from the jar as the product heats up. And if you turn your rings too tight, you risk your lids buckling as the air tries to escape from inside the jar. So you will find the link for 4Jars along with the discount code in the description of this video. So then I'm just going to take my favorite little water bath canning pot, and I'm going to stack it full with all of these half-pint jars of Rotel. And then I'm going to put the divider in, and I'm just going to fill this baby all the way to the top. And I'm going to include the 1/4 pint jars as well. So then I'm going to fill the canner with water until it's all the way to the top of this very top layer of jars. And because our product is cold or like room temperature, I'm going to start with room temperature or cold water, because you always want to make sure that the water you're adding to your canner is similar in temperature to your product, because otherwise you risk the expansion of your jars, and then they will break. So then we're going to turn the burner on, and as soon as it starts boiling, we're going to set our timer for 30 minutes, and we're going to water bath these for 30 minutes. So then, to pass the time while our diced tomatoes and green chilies are canning. My daughter and I are going to work on some of the pears that have ripened and are ready for canning. So then I'm going to take these sliced pears and put them all into jars. And I'm just going to pack each jar fairly full with pears because here again, the pears are raw. So when they get water bath, they're going to shrink a little bit. So because spiced pears are our favorite way to eat canned pears, I just stick a cinnamon stick down the side of each jar, and that cinnamon stick will infuse into the pears when we water bath them, and then also as they sit on the shelf. So the longer they sit, the more spicy and the more cinnamony they're going to taste. And then because these pears are already fairly sweet, I'm just going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar to kind of help preserve their color and texture. So then I'm just going to fill each jar to about 1 inch of headspace with water. And then we're going to turn the lids on, and these are ready to water bath. All right, it has been 35 minutes. So we are going to remove all of these. And whenever I have multiple sizes in one canner, I will always can them for the amount of time the largest can needs. So you can tell that the tomatoes did in fact release a lot of their own juices. So because I didn't add any water, these flavors will not be diluted at all, and there's still plenty of liquid in the jars. All right, all of these tomatoes that I have left, I am just going to put in the freezer, and then I'll get these out when I'm ready to make either pasta sauce or barbecue sauce or ketchup, something like that. So now we're also going to can these spiced pears that I made. So for those pears, we are only going to hot water bath them for 5 minutes. Now, I know that is not what the government recommends for pears. That is the way my mom and my grandma taught me to preserve pears, because you don't really want to cook the pears. You just want to you want to bring the product, make the product hot enough so that when it cools down, it creates a vacuum and seals the jars. The lack of oxygen and the sealed lid is enough to preserve your pears. So because we have very hard water here on the farm from our well, and we're currently out of water softener salt, all of my jars have this little white film on them, and it doesn't hurt anything. It just doesn't look very pretty. So I'm going to take some nice hot water with a splash of white vinegar, and I'm going to polish up all these jars so that they look nice and appetizing on our shelves. So a splash of vinegar in your water bath canner will usually eliminate this problem, and it will help dissolve all the minerals and calcium that is in your hard water. And when I got the Rotel out of the canner and I remembered that we were out of water softener salt, I put a splash of vinegar in the water when I was canning the pears, and those came out much better than the tomatoes did. So you might be asking, where do I use the diced tomatoes and green chilies? Well, because I like to simplify, I use diced tomatoes and green chilies in any recipe that calls for diced tomatoes. So in our chili, but also our favorite place to use it is in our homemade queso. Just our homemade Velveeta and 1 jar of diced tomatoes and green chilies makes our favorite queso. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed every minute of it, and thank you for being here. I sure appreciate you showing up week after week to watch our videos. Thank you. We'll see you next week.